Welcome back. It was another whirlwind week for the Trump administration. Over the weekend, we saw massive backlash to the president's executive order on immigration. It bans entry from 7 majority Muslim countries for 90 days. Refugees are also blocked for 120 days, and Syrian refugees are suspended indefinitely. Neil Gorsuch is the new nominee for the Supreme Court, but with Democrats threatening to block his confirmation, there is talk of the nuclear option in the Senate. There's also a botched raid in Yemen that left an American sailor dead and 3 service members wounded. Iran is on notice, and the president is bringing tough talk to foreign diplomacy. So much to discuss, and joining us for more on that is Frank Alcock, professor of political science at New College of Florida, Christian Ziegler, Republican state committee man for Sarasota County, and veteran politics reporter Wendy March. Thanks for being with us this evening. I don't even know where to start because we could begin with any of these. But first of all, President Trump has signed 20 executive orders in these first 2 weeks in office. He's been very busy doing that. Let's start with Frank, just a review of this beginning where we always like to analyze these first 100 days.
Right. Out of the gate, he's going to press the limits of his executive authority. In his own mind, I think he's going to try to fix everything that he thinks ails the country, with the turn of a pen. I think you could call it, there's a sense of indignation, I think, in a lot of what he's doing in his executive orders, recklessness, there's a bit of impulsiveness. I think a lot of his base loves it, and we'll see what happens. But there are repercussions and implications of these decisions. Until those repercussions start to hit people in the face, he'll receive the benefit of the doubt. But you can't say he's docile. I'll give him that.
True. And Christian, you may have the reaction that you're one of those people who love what he's doing so far.
Yeah, 2 things. Number 1, elections have consequences. And number 2, right after that, Donald Trump, he campaigned on certain issues, and he was very clear on those issues. And when he came into office, he's executing point by point on each one of those issues. And when you go around America, as the left, they're stirring up all these protests and everything about various issues and various made-up issues as well. He's coming in and executing on issues that really resonate with the American people, and those are the people that delivered the election for him across middle America, the average Joe, blue-collar workers. That's what he's focused on. He's delivering, and it's refreshing to see an elected official make promises and run on issues and actually carry them through.
But now, Wendy, he has the lowest disapproval, or highest, I should say, highest disapproval rating for a president at this stage in office for these first 2 weeks. Your response to that?
Well, what Chris said is correct. A lot of what Trump has been doing is exactly what he said in the campaign he was going to do. But he's also done some other things that some people think raise questions about his temperament, getting in the argument with the Australian Prime Minister, a strange phone call with the President of Mexico. And yes, his approval has dipped below 45%, 43 against 52% disapproval is in the latest Gallup. And what's astonishing, or I don't know if astonishing is the right word, but unprecedented, is for his approval rating as a new president to dip below 50% so quickly. No honeymoon.
I don't know about with these polls, but I wonder if they're the same people that were polling during the presidential election that basically gave him no chance to win. And the American people obviously came out and they elected him based on that agenda. All he's doing is carrying out that agenda.
Well, Christian is right. What happened in this election has raised questions about basically our entire system of political polling, something that we've relied on for a long time.
Okay, and Frank, what about all of the protests? I mean, the optics of that are obviously not good for the president, but is it something that maybe the entire country, as spoken by these polls, maybe there are people we don't know, like you mentioned, who love what he's doing, but what we're seeing on television are all these protests. Is that an issue?
Yeah, well, there are a number of folks that were against Trump from the get-go and continue to be. The level of energy, though, and I've certainly seen this all over the place, Trump's presidency is actually, rather than pushing people away, drawing resistance in at a level of energy that I've never seen before. This still, it doesn't cut, I think, necessarily into his base of support. But ultimately, there's a middle component of a coalition that he will need to govern that's going to be looking for results. He is off to, he's certainly not somebody that just says one thing and then doesn't follow through. He's one executive order after another, but a lot of these orders, I think, are reckless, they're very risky, and they will have repercussions that people will start to see pretty soon. Whether or not he's able to hold a sufficient coalition when that begins to happen remains to be seen.
Would you call them reckless?
Well, I think what you're seeing is the left, they're energized, and it's really the extreme and the far left that are energizing this movement. And those individuals didn't vote for Trump. They're never going to vote for Trump. But as they're taking to the streets and the media is so hyper-focused and giving them the attention, put the cameras in their face, what Donald Trump's doing every single day, you look at the TPP deal, you look at NAFTA, you look at immigration, he's going after the policies that everyday Americans care about, and those are the individuals that decide elections, not these paid protesters and some of these other far-left individuals that are running them.
And quickly before we go to break, Christian, do you hear from any of the Trump supporters saying, well, maybe this is just a little bit too much too soon? Are you hearing any of
No,
that?
actually quite the opposite. Again, I think he's winning over that middle, the blue-collar workers, a lot of union supporters. He's also pulling over the very far right that were quote-unquote never Trumpers and didn't come out to vote. And with the Supreme Court pick, you know, that's energizing them. Everywhere I'm going, I mean, I went to a dinner and spoke to, there were about 100 people there. They're fired up, and they all to a T said, this is amazing. I mean, it's almost overwhelming. It's difficult to keep up with, but they're loving seeing a president actually, or a politician just in general, do something.
And you mentioned the Supreme Court nominee. We will get to that in a moment, and we have much more in our discussion of President Trump's second week in the White House. That's coming up in a moment, right after we check in on our weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're discussing President Trump's second week in office. Our guests tonight are Frank Alcock, a political science professor at New College of Florida, Christian Ziegler, Republican state committeeman for Sarasota County, and Wendy March, one of Florida's most seasoned and knowledgeable political reporters. So because of that, we're going to start with you, Wendy, and talk about Neil Gorsuch for Supreme Court nominee. Your general thoughts on his nomination.
Congratulations on your, I think, correct pronunciation.
Thank you.
This to me is another example of Trump doing one of the things he actually said he would do in his campaign. He's appointed nominated a justice who's a hardline conservative but still a respected judge. To me, one of the most interesting things is this puts the Democratic senators, the large minority of Democrats in the Senate, in kind of a political bind. They will get pressure from their base, the liberal base, and from liberal organizations to take a hard line and oppose Gorsuch. If they do, the Republicans can probably get him appointed anyway by abandoning the filibuster. On the other hand, if they take that hardline stance, it could potentially hurt them in 2018 when there are a number of Democratic senators up for re-election in states that voted for Trump.
And Frank, President Trump has said, go nuclear if you have to. So your response?
He will. I think from Trump's perspective, I think this was a pretty wise decision. And I think Gorsuch, in terms of his qualifications, I think they're impeccable. He has a very far-right judicial philosophy. He's like Scalia version 2.0. Democrats will resist on the basis of that philosophy, but at the end of the day, whether it requires a lifting of the nuclear option or not, I think Trump will get his man, a very far-right conservative. But here's where things get interesting. I think ultimately, on certain issues, unless Gorsuch is masquerading as a fraud, he will be consistent in his judicial philosophy. He is very, very skeptical with respect to executive authority. And you might actually see this very interesting situation where Trump nominates a Supreme Court justice that starts to shoot down his own executive orders like skeet shooting on a Saturday, or not, and then Gorsuch will be exposed, you know, as a fraud. And so one of those two things I think is ultimately going to happen.
So interesting theory there. What are your thoughts on that, Christian?
I think conservatives are excited for this pick. You have Donald Trump. He listed out, you know, some judges that he would consider to put on the court. And Gorsuch came directly from that list. Again, Donald Trump doing exactly what he said he would do. It's going to be difficult for Democrats to stop it. I think 17 of the current Democrats in the Senate already voted for him. Also, former senators Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and there's another one as well that voted for him. And so he's already gotten the votes. They've already accepted him. So anything that they do differently, like Schumer, Gorsuch tried to meet with him and he turned down a meeting. and Schumer already voted for him. I mean, it's clear political games.
You're going to get
and they're playing
Gorsuch, but
for
do
it.
you think you're going to see a time where you're going to see Gorsuch and Trump on the wrong side of a number of orders?
Maybe, and that's kind of the role of the court, right? To review what actions are going on, and it's not really a partisan, body, or it shouldn't be. So maybe it does, maybe it happens, but I can't really obviously predict the future. But all the executive orders that Donald Trump's doing to date, all they're doing is executing current law, like the wall that was passed in 2006. Again, another bill that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton voted for. And all Trump is doing is saying, let's follow the law with his executive orders. He's actually not creating law like what Barack Obama did.
Okay, so we'll get to the wall in a moment, but first I want to talk about Betsy DeVos, because there have been some Republicans who have not come to her defense, who don't necessarily want her in for education secretary. So your thoughts on, they think maybe she's not qualified?
Well, I think when you look at the two Republicans that have come out against her, they're funded by the teachers unions. Teachers unions rarely give money to Republicans. They gave it to those two senators. So all you have to do is look at the finance records, and you'll see that with those two individuals. Betsy DeVos would be a phenomenal education secretary. She believes in focusing on the children. She believes in school choice. She believes in a quality education for all. Staunch supporter of charter schools. And she's definitely not controlled by the unions, which is nice and refreshing, because the unions really aren't there to stick up for the kids at the end of the day. So I think she's going to get through. I think she has the votes. The vote will be on Monday. And I think she's going to do a great job in that role.
But Frank, on the other side, some people are strongly against that philosophy on charter schools.
But it's going to be a close vote. She might squeak through, but I don't think it's going to be a good thing.
Okay, well, let's go to the wall. And Wendy, your thoughts on the funding issue. That is the biggest issue. In the campaign, Trump said Mexico's going to pay for the wall, probably one of his most famous quotes on the trail. But now there's some talk of, okay, he signed this executive order saying, let's look for funding. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, he of course adamantly insists that eventually he will figure out a way to make the Mexicans pay for this. It could cost, I've read estimates everywhere between $12 and $38 billion. And in many places, even at that, it won't actually be a wall. It'll be transparent, in some spots, according to what I read today. A transparent wall, I'm not sure of. Trump has not said how he'll make the Mexicans pay for it. There's been a lot of talk about what's called a border adjustment tax, which is essentially a tax on Mexican imports, but that basically, Democrats contend, would simply transfer the cost to Americans who would normally buy those imported goods, or businesses buying parts from Mexico. In many cases, American businesses send parts to Mexico, and then the same parts come back for final assembly into a product in the United States. So it's very difficult to say who's paying for what when you're taxing that back and forth.
I think it's humorous to see Democrats now all of a sudden caring about what something costs. This is one of the first times I've actually seen them raise that issue. When you look at the wall, it's much needed. Americans want it. You look across the country, they agree, they want the wall. You even have, again, Barack Obama voted for it. Hillary Clinton voted for it. Joe Biden voted for it. This is policy that was voted in 2006. It was passed overwhelmingly, and Trump's just going to execute it. When you talk about how you're going to pay for it, let's just be honest with ourselves. You go up to Washington, and every day they're passing bills that cost billions of dollars. And all you have to do is start maybe eliminating some of those bills. You look at the money we give to the UN, countless billions of dollars every single year. So it sounds like a lot of money.
Before we do have just a few seconds left, so I want to ask you, Marco Rubio commented that the majority of people coming here are coming by plane. They're not, the wall is not the issue.
The wall is going to be one of those alternative facts. 4 years from now, just look real hard and imagine it's there, and maybe you'll see it.
Well, hopefully it'll get done if the Democrats jump on board, just like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton did in 2006. So I think it's going to get done. Trump's going to get it done, just like everything he's done since he's been in office. He made it a point. He's getting all these various policy proposals.
But what about
enacted.
the people who are crossing the border not on foot?
That's another thing you have to look at. But just because there's other problems doesn't mean that you should try to solve one that could be very easily fixed if we just build a wall across our border.
Actually,
all right, we're going to have to. We do have our final thoughts segment, so we're going to take a quick break and then return with those final thoughts. Plus, find out what some of our viewers thought about last night's segment. Welcome back. President Trump said this week we're taken advantage of by every nation in the world virtually. It's not going to happen anymore. He certainly showed that, taking a hard line on matters of international diplomacy. So does it bode well for the nation going forward? Our guests join us with their final thoughts. And Frank, I want to get your opinion on the issue with Iran conducting a nuclear test, and then the U.S. issuing sanctions, and then Iran firing back. What does this mean for the Iran nuclear deal?
We'll see. The stakes are higher. He can't screw this one up. This one is really, really important. I think a preemptive military strike would be very, very bad, and Iran cannot acquire nuclear weapons. And so staying within those boundaries and figuring out a path to an ending which doesn't involve any of those two, it's a tricky, it's a tricky diplomatic challenge, and we'll see what happens.
And if we were to see military action, would that be anytime soon? What would happen with that?
If either us or the Israelis feel as if the Iranians are getting really close to an operational nuclear weapon, something could happen. But the repercussions on that one would be, they would just spiral in a number of directions that I'm not sure everybody can fully appreciate that. And so it would be a very bad thing. And let's hope we don't have to go there.
And Christian, your final thoughts about these first 2 weeks and what else we're going to see in these first 100 days?
No, I think it's great. Everything he's done, again, like I said earlier, he laid it out in his campaign. The people went to the ballot box in November and they elected him president based on those issues, and he carried them right through. So, as he goes forward, I don't really know what to expect going forward. I think that when we talk about the foreign policy, America's been taken advantage of for too long. We've been apologetic. We've been weak. And it's time for us to stick up for ourselves, really America first, as he said in his speech. And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see everything that Trump does is going to be focused on what's the benefit to the U.S. more so than anyone else in the world. And I think that's good.
And Wendy, have you seen a first 2 weeks in office for a president like this before?
Well, nobody has. There's never been one. That's just all there is to it. There's no question that the Trump presidency has inspired a grassroots progressive or liberal movement against what he's doing. The marches in Washington, St. Petersburg were part of that. The question is, will this, as some of the sponsors and organizers hope, turn into a sustained long-term Tea Party style effort? Yet to be seen.
All right. We want to thank our guests, and before we go, we do want to share some of what our viewers thought about last night's topic, new school transfer rules. Starting this fall, students in Florida will be able to transfer to any school with a vacancy, including out of their district and mid-semester. Many coaches fear it will create a free agent mentality for all these young athletes. So here's what some of you are saying. John Forehand writes, "There's no doubt it will. Why would an athlete stay at a losing school when they can go and play for a winning school?" Michelle McGrath writes, "That's crazy. I hope they have to transport their own kids. Great example to set for an athlete on a losing team." And Ken Porter writes, "They can do that in California, but they have to give up a year of sports eligibility." So let us know your thoughts on the Trump administration's second week by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And if you would like to watch this roundtable discussion or our previous discussions, they are available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. So thanks to all of our guests for being here tonight. Frank Alcock teaches political science at New College of Florida. Christian Ziegler is a Republican state committee man for Sarasota County. And Wendy March is a Florida reporter with decades of experience covering politics.